Ready to make a real impact every day? Join the Active Day Home Care team and help clients maintain their independence in the comfort of their own homes. Make a difference in someone's life as you provide essential daily assistance and protect their health and happiness. Earn up to $20 an hour and enjoy additional perks like optional daily pay, 401k, paid time off, ongoing educational training, and more. Join a team that values care, compassion, and your professional growth. Visit activeday.com to apply.
My name's Adelle Onyango, and welcome to another episode of Legally Clueless. No, seriously, I have no clue what I'm doing, but I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one. Hey you, welcome to this episode of Legally Clueless podcast. Thank you so much for rocking with the pod. This episode does feature a story that mentions issues around suicide, which can be quite triggering for some. So before I play the clip of what's coming up, I just want to give you that heads up so that in case this is not a moment that you can listen to such themes, you may want to give this episode a skip.
That's when I really would say I started to experience like really severe depression and even considered ideation at I'm 15 at the time. Yeah, so I'm 15. Yeah, so that's the time when I know there's schoolwork is suffering. No matter how hard I try, my grades are just not getting better. And then in terms of my mood, like I'm sinking to a place it's very hard to rise out of on my own. You know, it seems so prolonged.
That is Wairimu. Part one of her story is coming up a little later in this episode. If you are an OG member, nothing but love for you. If you are new here, welcome to the family. Audio episodes of this podcast go out every single Monday. Hey, I'm actually so shocked that I have managed to crawl out of my bed and record this because, man, what a hectic couple of days I've had. For those of you who are not in Kenya, we last week on Wednesday had a protest to commemorate all of the Kenyans we lost last year during the June finance bill protests, last year, June 25th. We were commemorating and taking a stand against police brutality. And guess what we were met with on Wednesday? More police brutality. In fact, I dare say this was possibly the most violent protest I have ever attended. I don't know if it's that it was the most violent one or that it's been a year of just heavy stories. Every so often, heavy stories that personally my mind and body, whatever, is just like, whoa, we are tired. But Wednesday was intense. I think on a personal level, we had to hide out from the police. At a point, they threw tear gas right into the building we were in, myself and a friend. There was a point I thought I was dying from tear gas because I couldn't breathe. I couldn't see. And thank God for my friend because she, I'd strapped my arm around her and she's just climbing these stairs. She's also not seeing anything, but she's just like leading me. And I'm just constantly telling her, I can't breathe. We went through that, hid somewhere in this building, came back down to the ground floor because we want to rejoin the protests. And there is a young man who's been shot and he's going into shock. And we're trying to figure out how to get an ambulance. And I don't know, it's like our network is jammed, so we can't call the medics hotline. And just like being in that chaos and then running back to our hiding spot. And then there's a point we came back down and we wanted to get out of the building and there were goons at the front of the building. So we are stranded because one side has goons, one side has policemen who keep throwing tear gas anytime you try to leave. It was, my goodness, it was a lot. I just stayed in bed on Thursday, on Friday, on Saturday into Sunday, and then crawled out of bed Sunday midday. How are we meant to function in this atmosphere? Like, how are you functioning? Because I just completely gave social media a break, but it doesn't stop me wondering if that young man made it. I think I caught a headline that said 18 people was the total of the people dead. And my first thought was that young man, and wondering, is he okay? Or is he one of the 18? There were so many accounts of women being sexually assaulted and raped. And in the middle of this, I'm drawing up scripts for for a campaign and a partnership we have coming up. I am making payments to suppliers who've done stuff for us. I'm aligning things with our correspondence. I'm talking to my right-hand woman and scheduling things for July and August. How bizarre. How fucking bizarre. Like, it's just, how is this normal? And sometimes I think about, I don't have kids, and I feel like, thank God, not only from a, how would I be able to go through this mentally and look out for someone smaller, but I feel like we've made such a mess of the world that I'm like, if ever I had doubts about having a kid, I think right now they would be firmed up. I would never want to bring a child into this world. But at the same time, I have nieces and nephews who I want them to experience an incredible world, like a world that supports them in becoming their best selves, a world where there's healthcare and education and democracy and safety. And like, a kid can actually say they want to grow up to be a policeman because it's dignified and it's a sign of someone who's going to keep you safe and not a sign of somebody who's going to kill you. So then I'm like, oh, you can't stop fighting. And there's a bit of guilt as well, because it's almost like it's a privilege to rest. It's a privilege to rest from this resistance. What world is this that we have created? And my goodness, when does it let up? I'm not dumping on you. And if it comes off that way, I truly apologize. I'm just trying to be more honest, because I feel like I need to do that more. Like, be a bit more honest with my emotions, especially when they're heavy. Honest in terms of not with myself, but sharing in my safe spaces. And this is one of them. And maybe you're also feeling this overwhelm. And I guess we just have to take it a day at a time. That's what's helped me in my staying in bed thing. It's just like talking to myself slowly and like saying, okay, let's get up and have like a meal. And when I eat, saying, wow, you had a meal. Okay, let's get up and take a bath. And I run my bath and I pour my, oils and whatever in the bath. And I sit in it and I'm like, okay, look at you, you're taking a bath. And even just being in my studio now, recording this for you, I'm going to feel like, okay, I've done this one other thing. But I'm so disappointed in us adults, in us. This is not the world that not only are we meant to exist in, but like our kids and like the kids coming after us. The kids who are being shot by police are children in my view. I am 36 years old. These are people born in 1999. And not to say that it's okay to shoot older people. No, It's to say there is a huge breakdown in that we look at people younger than us as targets and not as people we need to guide and support and protect and celebrate and build things for. When did we get here? You know, when did we fucking get here? And who is to blame? I think that's it. I think I'm disappointed. And I haven't been disappointed in a long time. And so it's like, oh, such a heavy feeling. And so honestly, from Wednesday, I had all the shows produced and they were waiting my approval and I was stuck in bed. How are you doing? How are you doing? Because also, even if you're not in Kenya, it feels like this is a global thing, right? Togo is fighting for their resistance. America is fighting against their mad person in power. Like, don't get me started on the Middle East. How are you doing? How are you also taking it an hour at a time? Honestly, these past 4 days, I've been taking it an hour at a time. Tomorrow, I have lunch with a friend and who also happens to sit on our board here at Legally Clueless. And I'm already trying to conserve energy for driving there, having a conversation with a human being, and then running back to my house. Whew. How are you doing? I've asked that so many times, but I truly mean it. How are you doing? You can let me know in the comments. Don't even give me tips. Just tell me how you are doing. Let's not swap tips or anything. Like, how are you handling? How are you handling all of this? And as you're dropping that comment, I am just going to leave you with 100 African stories. Yes, let's jump into that, right? Let's jump into that. And this is quite an interesting and timely, very timely story because Wairimu does this incredible thing of just taking us through her journey of figuring out that her brain works differently. I love that she phrases it that way. It's given me a lot of comfort, even in this time, to hear her say that. Instead of thinking something's wrong with you, no, your brain just works differently. And so part one really takes us through her discovering that and even figuring out coping mechanisms in primary school. So listen to part one and then we'll regroup after.
100 African stories on Legally Clueless. Stories from Africa.
My name is Wairimu. I am a lot of things. I do a lot of things. But maybe the one I'm the most proud of is being an advocate or a representative for what it could look like to manage chronic illness, but still build a career built on a mission to problem solve for some of the challenges I have faced as a person navigating illness with a lot of big dreams. So that looks like being a psychoeducator. So that's one of the things that I do. But also the career path I have taken has been centered around communications quite a bit, both in marketing, copywriting. I still look at the psychoeducation work as an extension of that, not a hobby. It's still, it's my life mission. So I just look for work that allows me to continue to exercise those skills. This felt like a natural way to channel my advocacy because of the experiences that I had growing up and realizing that I have a different brain. I have a different brain. Maybe taking it back to when I was 7, that's the earliest memory I have of recognizing that I do have a different mind. Perhaps before I go into how I felt, let me talk about someone I identified and I felt like I want to be like them when I grow up. And You'll never guess who it is. Many people won't. I didn't know Instagram when I was 7, but Mekatilwa Menza is a freedom fighter. Is a Kenyan freedom fighter that I came across when I was in class 2, and at the time we were doing social studies. That was the subject. I remember in the textbook that we had, there was a tiny paragraph of what she was doing for her community in Taita. I just observed that her story was, I don't know, maybe 3 lines, 4 or 5 lines, next to Oluibun Lenana and the likes, that was super long and detailed. And I was like, who is this person? I want to know more about them, but they seem really strong and I want to be this person. I want to exude this kind of strength. At that time, I believe that time I was 8, but shortly after I did start to notice I'm struggling in school to a degree. It became very nerve-wracking to sort of sit still and study, or actually revise after I go through classwork, to a point that it made me very anxious. So I started to feel like, whoa, will I be able to keep up with school? And at the time, there's no language for, maybe, let me call them learning struggles to a degree. But I realized I need to somehow find a way to pass exams, if nothing else. I may not memorize content, like the subjects and the topics, but I may need to learn how to pass exams, because I still want to get an education, because I have big dreams of doing big stuff in the world, and education is one way to get there. As a result, I just started studying, kind of like, what can I call it, like probability, ABCD, studying multiple questions, getting good at knowing what might be the next set of questions in the next paper, how can I get better at finding the answer even before I do calculations for math, things like that. I started doing things like that. And at that point, I think I was like an overall 73 in exams, like the way now I was in a public school and we were like 100 kids maybe. And at that time, we were like 73 out of 100. So after I did this long enough, a few terms later, I shot to number 1. And I really think it was because of identifying you have a different brain and then finding a different way to study, which is not revising. It's not going home to read books the same people do. I just started listening to teachers a lot, starting to predict what questions would be like, and then I made that my thing for the 7 years. Well, that was class 2, so the remaining 6 years of primary school. And yeah, I did it for so long that I became quite academically dominant, and all through to finishing KCP and being the best in my school and 3rd best in the division. But I truly believe it's because of a level of awareness that the brain is just different. It wasn't rosy, but like I feel like that's the hero's journey that sort of came from this woman I identified called Mekatilwa Menza, and I figured, what's my hero's journey with these struggles that I'm having? Within that time, the number of things happened. It wasn't just school. So at 8, once I figured out how to move through course, at least classwork, when I was around 10, I used to dance a lot everywhere, and not, perfect choreography or anything, but I was obsessed, watching, Bow Wow back in the day, those R&B artists in the late 2000s. So I enjoyed dancing every chance that I got, in family gatherings, in school, everywhere. And there was this kids band called Sunflower Kids that came scouting for students in my primary school, and I was so interested, and they were offering like dance, like choreography, acting, and singing, like recording music, in the studio and stuff like that. And at the time, I had been trying to learn the guitar because I was watching a lot of Disney, enjoying these artists, Jonas Brothers, things like that. And I figured, even if I don't have a perfect voice, I think I can try to learn something. So I had a guitar teacher for like a few sessions. Then this came along and I took it on, and it wasn't about being perfect in anything or being good at anything. It was, this is my opportunity to learn on the job and just become the best that I can be. So that, I think, was my first introduction to a work ethic to a degree. Remember, if the struggles around learning, it's easy to feel that they will infiltrate even interests and it'll be hard, or that doing other stuff will be a distraction from the schoolwork and things like that. But I personally felt I had so much energy and such a desire to just learn things that it's almost like having a dedicated place to direct all that energy, that drive, into multiple activities and stuff that I have to learn. With dance, you had to perform, you had to get on stage and perform. So even those kinds of things started teaching me how to commit myself to a discipline and practice. And I saw that filter its way even back into schoolwork. It made me less anxious about class because I was doing something really hard outside of schoolwork. So the same importance, or maybe the same stress people had towards school, I think picking up this other thing allowed me to diffuse some of that anxiety, so to speak. So during that period, I think maybe a couple of months later, I also was a Girl Guide in primary school, and I represented Kenya Girl Guides Association at a forum to end FGM when I was 12, you know. And I was the youngest. I was the youngest person there with, adults, delegates from Ethiopia, other countries. I may not have known, I'm 12, so I don't know all the research at the time, but I was so open to learning and just sharing my experience of being around other girls and leading other girls because I was in school doing it. That was my first paid job. My first paid job, they actually paid me 12,000 at that time. Even that, I had to write a report afterwards, and the experience was wonderful in terms of being trusted with more responsibility to sort of use my voice, and learn how to be confident with the level I'm at. So I'm 12, but I know something and I can communicate it. There may be these adults who are experts, maybe in studying, childhood, FGM and things like that, but we can learn from each other. I think it was a forum that really allowed me to build that confidence, and this would set the stage for me feeling like my voice can do something. It's not about having money, a job, recognition, but I can start nurturing my voice to communicate, tell a story, and it could mean something to someone else and make that a thing. I don't need to wait to get a job to do the advocacy work. So I think that period between 10 and 12, like, I did a lot of things that showed me, even as I was managing symptoms, like, I am so much more and I can be so much more. And this is just scratching the surface. Like, amazing things can happen for me and to me. I just have to be present and seize the moment to the best of my ability. Not to say that struggle doesn't come along, but wow, I think I want to be so excited by the life ahead of me that the pain I'm in, I know it will be short term, or it pales in comparison to a degree. Even when the pain lasts for a while, I have this thing to look forward to. And I had asthma, like very chronic asthma during this period developed, maybe when I was around 11. And there were moments when I was out of school for a week at a time. Maybe you're admitted in hospital or you're at home because you're sick. So you are missing out on classes. And I knew, one example comes to mind when I was 13, or rather, I think I was 14, because 14 is KCPE period. That's the national exams in Kenya. During that time, I remember I was admitted in hospital and then discharged. So I had a week before a major exam. The exam is not going to wait, well, because one person was away from class. But I told myself, I think I still want to be the best at it. I still want to be the best at it. Let me work with what I've got. And those things that I'd been harnessing throughout, which is listen a lot, just get good at predicting priority areas, helped me. And I was the best in my class. I remember, I think I was the best, if not maybe number 2, but I did quite well. And those experiences, again, with still the body's feeble and weak because of a tight chest and things like that. I think even mentally what's happening is you're learning how to believe in a version of yourself that you're not seeing yet, but believing that if you can hold on, you can make that a reality, as opposed to this thing that's hurting me right now is the reason this thing didn't work out. And I'm not saying that, it worked out every single time, but I think something that this period of my life really, really taught me of, managing illness, but also doing these things that I imagine not every person at 8 will say they did stuff like this, these opportunities. I think they really showed me, they gave me a bit of courage to keep pushing myself beyond what I think was capable. And a lot of times I watched myself kind of succeed because of thinking that way. This is very interesting. I think the name it took quite a while, but at least in terms of that experience, to be honest, because I'm performing well academically, I'm taking on extracurricular things, I don't think anyone thinks there's a problem, to be honest. But for myself, I do observe that I may be, for instance, trying to sit still, study, but that's a bit hard. And even though I go in for an exam, there's a part of me that's very anxious afterwards, like about the results. I catastrophize and I imagine I failed. I've not even, this is not even like a mini failure, like I'm probably the last in my class. Like, it would be that extreme kind of anxiousness. So I think those things did show me like, whoa, there's something, a bit tough here for me. And much as I'm front facing, like, I appear to be doing well with it, I do feel like I'm struggling. So sincerely, I don't think anyone, like at that period, there was a reason to suggest that my brain is different. If anything, like, because of the success, it's different in a genius-like reasons, not for there might be you might be struggling with mental illness to a degree. Like, I don't think at that stage there was anything like that. However, I think when it became super apparent was now switching to high school, and the learning was so different. We no longer had multiple choices. It was, you have to read, and you have to write long answers, explain 20 marks, things like that. So at this stage, actually is when I started to experience now a different type of decline, in terms of, it's not really even struggling to study. It's also just a level of low mood. And I think it was an adjustment period. I went to Limuru Girls, which, also known as Trucks. But it was first time, I was away from home and all that stuff. Maybe also the change in weather a little bit because it was quite cold. But the point is, we went from 5 subjects to 12 subjects. So that was also a lot to take in. And again, multiple choice is gone. So if you're studying, like, you have to read all these things. You have to do a level of I would say memorizing, but there's a lot to memorize. There's a lot of content. So I think that overwhelmed really, I watched my grades really go down really fast. So at that point, I think for myself, yes, I knew I had found a way to adapt previously in primary school. So I know my brain is different and I found a way to adapt. But now here, it's a new challenge. So now to everyone else, it is relatively surprising in that, hey, but you are the best. Even when you were finishing KCP, you're the best in your school. So I think that made my confidence suffer quite a bit, and that's even now how the journey of like low mood started to show up in terms of just bordering on depression. At the time, I don't know the term depression, but I know school is struggling, and school was my happy place because with health issues like asthma, I wasn't like an athletic person at the time. So what I had was my schoolwork, and now even that was suffering. So it felt like a loss of identity to a degree during that time in my life, and a loss of identity coupled with like change in environment and having to adapt. I think those things just started. I went, downhill, and the grades are also lowering. Towards the end of that first year, which was Form 1, now for secondary school, it was Form 1. That's when I really would say I started to experience like really, really severe depression. And even considered ideation at I'm 15 at the time, yeah. So I'm 15, yeah. So that's the time when I know there's schoolwork is suffering. No matter how hard I try, my grades are just not getting better. And then in terms of my mood, like, I'm sinking to a place it's very hard to rise out of on my own. It seems so prolonged. And the thing is, remember some of the stuff I shared earlier had to do with, being in primary school and working on my mentality. The vision was always, even when I'm in pain to a degree, and that was the case with asthma quite a bit. It was just in the mind, go to the mind and see how further can we push. Here, it was very hard to even do that. So you see, already even in the mind, at the time, I don't know the word bipolar, obviously, not very well at that time. I got to know it a year later, but there's something happening because this is still off-brand. It's enough for me to say, because, you can be sad and go through a tough time. I still really believe in that. Just because you're sad, it doesn't automatically mean everyone who is sad is probably going through a depressive episode. And it's nice to have those levels that you can believe you'll rise out of it, right? But now that one was it was very prolonged, and it would go on to follow me even in Form 2, when it just wasn't getting any better. School is obviously not getting any better. So now that's the point at which even ideation was just worsening. So even living with that thing, what language do you have for, IOS, suicide ideation at the time? There's no curriculum for that. You just know loss of identity has happened. Things are not improving. So then what's the point of being here? Like, how am I even helping myself? Because the idea is to, get through education well and go continue this mission career-wise. But yeah, that wasn't happening. And that was a very, very hard time to navigate, I must say. And I remember that was the first time in my life that I wasn't sure if I'd live to see. I was 16 at the time, so I wasn't sure I'd live to see like the next birthday, because even around the time my birthday is March 30th. So like even the point that it had come like to that worst point where I'm actually now, there's passive ideation and there's active ideation. Yeah. So with passive, it's really, if this bus hit me right now, it'd be okay, but you're not going to jump in front of the bus, but you're thinking something can happen. It's okay if something happens to me. But I'm not going to do anything. Active is you're planning. That's the time sometimes people will probably write letters. One of the articles that I have up on my website, it's called Suicide is Not a Dirty Word. And it's actually a journal entry from that season in my life when I was 16, just describing that emotion, yeah? Familiarizing myself with it, not hating myself for it, just like looking at it in the face and deciding we're going to live together. Because one of the things that I think kills more than the disease is stigma. So even when you realize you're you're at that point, it's easy to actually go through because, whoa, you're looking down on yourself and imagining, I never thought I'd be one of these people who think this way, because society has already taught us to judge and shame people who die by suicide, right? So when you find yourself thinking that way, you also imagine, then, oh, shame on me, might as well go out. Mind you, there's living with it, just learning to live with it and accepting yourself is a way, I think, to allow you to stay alive a bit longer. So that was my intention with writing. It wasn't exactly a goodbye letter for me. It was almost like I was still fighting. I was still fighting, even in that season, by choosing to sit and understand what those thoughts mean. So eventually, yeah, I turned it into, a public article to allow other people to channel the emotion, so that before you can say you have overcome that season, this going through it. And I wanted to create, I think I was trying to create something for myself to give myself permission to go through it, rather than die at the first, just immediately, quote unquote die, because I've hated myself into, non-existence. So yeah, that season, that period, allowed me to make peace with, experiencing those thoughts and going through them. I think, yeah, around that time I was 16. And I think still there's a fighter in me. I really believe, and that's why I started this story talking about Mekatili Wamenza and freedom fighters. I think there's a part of me that's just such a fighter. And so when I realized like things are tanking in the school that I'm in, I'm not seeing progress at all. I really just requested for a switch, and I more like, really advocated for a switch to a different school. But it was later in the year, Form 3, KCSE, now the national exam for secondary school is in a year. So even that is a bit risky, but teachers were striking in the school that I was in. So I was behind on syllabus already, and the school that I was going to go to was way ahead in syllabus. So it's almost like, it's a fork in the road, and every decision is risky to a degree. I'm behind on syllabus in the school that I'm in, and the school that I'm going to is ahead. And even in being behind in syllabus, remember, I'm very depressed. I'm very depressed. I'm ideating. Just going through a loss of identity. So even the version of me that's going to go and try and reverse the situation or create a great comeback it's a very steep climb. However, I felt that in my heart, I was done with where I was. Because one would argue stay there and move at that pace or something. But I just realized, okay, I need a fresh start. And even if it means working harder in the next place, like I think a change of environment will be good for me. So I remember I love writing. So I even wrote down letters trying to just organize my thoughts for my folks and make a case for myself. Because I really wanted to explain the rationale behind why this feels like a better switch and what I hope to accomplish in the next place. At the time, you're a teenager. So you may not have what is it called? I don't know, like formal language or whatever, but at least I think this is the next best decision. Thankfully, I did get the opportunity to move to the next school, but now presented with a new set of challenges. They're way ahead of syllabus. And remember, the learning, I've not yet grasped a lot of syllabus from the previous school in the first 3 years already. I've been depressed for a majority of it, so I don't remember syllabus as well. Like what is it called? The word would be knowledge acquisition, but it's literally just saying, the way you remember, ideally you're supposed to be studying Form 1 to remember curriculum from Form 1 through to Form 3. I just was blank. During that season of my life, I'm mostly, a lot of the thoughts and considerations I'm making are truly, truly mostly in my head, because my peers, it's, you almost empathize. You don't want to overwhelm them because we're all teenagers. Like at least in my head, that's how it felt. I perceived that this is a lot of heavy stuff, and even they are just children. I mean, we all are, but I felt like this is a lot heavier. So I navigated a lot of it like internally. Like I was problem solving actively for myself. I mean, I know there's a period where I did engage a deskmate of mine, but I watched the way it overwhelmed them, and I didn't want to really make them feel responsible for this as well on top of school. Even they are adjusting, they're trying to study, get ahead on grades. So maybe not, I didn't like let on as much. However, I will say, I think in my first year, that was Form 1, I did make a friend in a senior, like a Form 4 student. And even when you share, you're mindful not to overwhelm with certain things. But it did, a few classmates back then did allow for like a version of sharing. And I'm sure even they're well-meaning and probably would have been open to more, but you're also reminding yourself that we are all trying to manage school. I am managing school, they are too. So it's really, for me, I'm trying to build strategy in my mind for like, okay, what's the threshold? Like, at what point do I feel like this isn't working anymore? I need maybe the next school, the next environment, things like that. In terms of school, even with teachers, to the best of my ability, it was just trying to see, is there a different way I can study to try and improve these grades? So it wasn't really like verbalizing a lot of this externally. I think I just naturally, I found myself kind of problem solving internally during that period of my life. Then now when it came to deciding that I think a switch would be the next best thing, moving to the next school meant they're ahead. I also had to drop some subjects because they weren't offering them in that school. I was doing music in high school, by the way. Plan was to learn how to play the flute and the piano perfectly, and then stage a production for KCSE, because that's how that subject was structured. And it was also maybe one of the few things that give me joy during that period. So I'm very happy it's a subject I picked, even then it never ended up finishing it for Form 4. It was me still tapping into that period of my life in primary school when being part of that kids band really allowed me to be creative, direct a level of energy somewhere, work towards something even that I was not good at, but I could become better at over time. And even at the same time, even at church, I still used to, participate in choir and things like that. So it was a very supporting, cross-cutting thing when it comes to like the creative bit, yeah. So now moving to this other school is another big transition. It was farther away from the last one, first of all, but also I had to drop music because they didn't offer it there, and I went from 8 subjects now at that stage to 7. It was building from the ground up again, but my grades would go even lower before they got up. And at that point, I remember when even my grades went even lower because obviously they're ahead, so they're not going to adjust their exams for the new student who's coming in Form 3, Term 3, So Form 3, Term 3. Okay, it was maybe end of Term 2, but mostly I would say Term 3. So I remember arriving there and realizing I'm grateful for this. I know what this is an opportunity for me, and I asked for this. I need to make it stick. I need to show people that it was the right decision. Well, not to show them, to show myself it was the right decision, but really, they did make an investment, so it needs to work out. But I realized my mood is still struggling a lot. It wasn't the whole complete fix I thought it was going to be. I have to find a tiny thing to start building up from. There's still an opportunity here. We have fewer students. The teachers are very more hands-on because we are fewer. So let me see what I can do. So during that period, for the first time in my life, I think at that point in time, I'd been performing really well in primary school. I hadn't had the experience of maybe not being a top performer. Well, at that point, I already have for 3 years. But I spent time with some students who I could see them really struggling to break into the next grade, like now I think C maybe to like a B minus and things like that. And because we're a smaller group of students, I could just encourage them. And as I'm encouraging myself, because I'm also trying to claw my way back to becoming a better performer. So in that process, I think it just showed me again that spirit of you can still encourage even when you're down, you don't need to be in perfect condition to help somebody else. So I remember, I think that period was just a bit tough, but I went on to pick chemistry became the subject. I decided, let me try and get better at it, then I'll work on the others. And even if I'm working on this one thing, I'm taking exams for everything, but work on this subject, even if it's for this first term, for these 3 months. That was Form 4. And I watched myself like go from a D to like a B. I think a B plus maybe for like in a few months, just off of hyper focusing. That's stuff that I learned to do in primary school because I realized I had a different brain. So just learning to use exams again, proactively predict stuff helped me improve at that. And when I watched myself improve in that one subject, I was like, okay, KCSE is not far away. You may not be able to do this for all the subjects. Remember, there are set books I had never read. For Swahili, I know there's one set book I don't think I ever completed. For some subjects in biology, geography, and math, I never did those topics, and I sat for KCSE with unfinished topics. Yeah, unfinished, and some I've never looked at. So again, even that thing of learning how to just pick questions well really came in handy. And at this point, I've not even mentioned the term ADHD to a degree. I've not mentioned it at all, but later on in life is when you're realizing you're adapting. You're learning how to adapt for school systems and things like that at every stage, right? And you see, the thing that keeps me going through all of this is really that feeling of my dreams are so much bigger than what I'm going through right now. And what I'm going through is a lot. Like for anyone, it was just so much. And there's no reason to suggest that I will get to the other side or I will rise from this or I'll have a good grade in KCSE. After those 3 years, I should have probably been repeating a class, I think. But I pushed myself that Form 4. I'm fortunate there's the one teacher who noticed I'm very good in English, but I was struggling with, writing paper 3, which was the set books and stuff. And he was trying to understand, you're very smart with these other things. Why are you struggling here? Like, you should be stronger here, But there's a part of my brain, it was just hard, yeah? But instead of criticizing me or feeling like, but you're intelligent, you should be doing it, he started tutoring me. He just asked me, let's be meeting at this time. And he did it over and over again. And I told him about my dreams. And he told me, go pursue this, believe in yourself, things like that. And that really did something for me in terms of showing me, it may be June, KCSE is in a few months, but I think I can make something happen. Like, I know it's been a crazy 4 years, but there's a hero's journey here. Like, I can make something happen. So we did mocks, which is usually like that big major exam before you do the final one. And I was actually the best in English in my school. Yeah, both the girls and boys side. Yeah, boys side are like literally over the fence, and then the girls side is on this side. But yeah, we're close enough. We'd compete with each other for a long time. Previously, they were actually properly a mixed school, but then over time I think they separated, so that's when I found them. But yeah, they were right next to us and we were competing with each other. But yeah, that period just showed me like, I still have it in me to go start from the bottom and then build myself, back up. And it was encouraging, and I had built some momentum. And unfortunately, I went into a depressive episode like right before KCSE after building all that momentum. And I describe it as, there's a way you can be, present, and you can have tough times and you'll get back from them. But like I call it, I know it's depression when it's very hard to even rise, like get back to a baseline, because baseline is not perfection. Baseline is not completely happy, there are no problems in my life. It's just, you can bounce back. It was hard to bounce back. And I was like, this thing that happened last year is happening right now, like literally 2, maybe 1.5 months to KCSE. That means capacity will be a bit messed up. If I was going to tell myself, we'll finish those set books and we'll be ready. Yes, you have to sacrifice some things and change strategy in terms of how you study. And during that time, I just, again, you just accept like this thing is happening and what can we work with it? Or that's what I think I told myself. So during this time, strangely enough, I remembering how in primary school I was able to do the extracurricular stuff and give them everything, like show up, learn how to be competitive with myself, work ethic, all that stuff. I knew that still trying to do something else alongside the revising could help me. And at that point in time, I think it was actually just reading books, to be honest. And it's not like this is it's not a personal development book. I think during KCSE, I was reading Toilet, Breaking, no, I don't know, Patoan, that book. It just allowed me to it was a really big one, but it allowed me to apply, like just focus on something different and try to remember stuff, try to work on my imagination to a degree. And I think it helped me when it came back to reading other stuff, if it's set books or preparing for exams. It's a very small, weird thing, but I think it helped me be less hard on myself, because exams are going to come and there was nothing I was going to do about that. And already mood-wise, it's not so great. So pick a thing that, will exercise, creativity in the mind and things like that. And I think I found it to be very useful. But yeah, that period, I just studied to the best of my ability. But strangely enough, I finished Form 4 with a B+, yeah? I missed an A- by 1 point, I remember, and I cried. But it was really, there's nothing, I was not sure anything was going to work out, because there's some exams I did and it was very tough. As I told you, there's some topics I hadn't done. But there was no time to think about the risk and be afraid. It was just, you have nothing. Since there's nothing... there's so much more to be worried about. Let's believe in a tiny thing. So anything could happen, right? Just give it everything you've got. I would say I self-diagnosed just off of seeing kind of what's happening in my mind and the struggles with mood. And the one in particular I was able to put a name to was bipolar. And I think I did a very quick search on Google. I don't know if it was Google. Was it Google? I don't know. I was 16. So I did a quick search and I came across it, and it felt like it matched at least the depression side, I want to say. And generally, like, I was always a fast talker at that time. I want to say way more than what I'm doing right now, but like it was conspicuously a lot more. So those things like pressured speech and racing thoughts, like that was normal for me. So when I, came across it, I was like, okay, maybe this might be making sense. It's just that I didn't perceive some of them. I didn't perceive every single symptom I went to as purely disruptive to the degree that I felt like, okay, I need to see someone to put a stop to this right now. I didn't have the insight to know maybe psychiatrists even exist at the time. But I think that quick search allowed me to know, okay, this is a thing. I'm not pretending. So maybe it helped me with less self-stigma, just a quick search. So that's, I think, the first time I was able to name at least for bipolar. For ADHD, honestly, no, that would come way later, way later. But what maybe I think has been useful in my journey during that period, even without the names to it and things like that, is studying self, like kind of studying myself, trying to see patterns in behavior and how can those help me navigate a future similar situation. I think that's a useful tool for anyone at whatever stage of treatment. So during this period, I thankfully, KCC, I want to say in hindsight, it did work out. I just really felt like, wow, the dream was to go back to being an A student, and we missed it. But you see, to be honest, I was failing to see just the things that I'd overcome, in a very short time span, at the time. But that allowed me to go into law school. And frankly, I think I chose law school because I wanted to show that I'm not a failure. I'm taking a serious course after a period of struggling and things like that. And it's not a smart decision. That's not how you pick subjects, but that's what happened. But you see, even this place requires a lot of reading, and so it's still overexposing that previous difficulty in the last place, academically anyway.
Catch more African stories in the next episode of Legally Clueless.
That is part 1 of Wairimu's story. Part 2 is going to be out next week, Monday. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast, whatever platform you're listening to this on. I want to know what you connected with. I told you when we started, the thing that really stood out for me is how she says, my brain works differently. I think that's so powerful. I think even the way she talks about battling suicidal ideation and confronting it and removing the shame around that really connected with me, because I've shared this before on the podcast. It's something I have battled with. What did you connect with? Is there similarities to your high school and primary school experience? When we get to part 2, we're going to dive into working through university, diagnosis, and the incredible work that she's doing now. Until then, thank you so much for listening to this podcast to the very, very, very end. I truly appreciate you. I'm sending you so many hugs because and I still believe that you have absolutely everything it takes to heal.
That's it for this episode of Legally Clueless. You can share this podcast with your friends. You can keep it for yourself. I'm not judging. Just make sure you're here next week for the next episode.